Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited for you guys to join us on this Monday night. So we're going to be talking about home insurance tonight. We have the pleasure of welcoming Mercury Insurance, IBHS, Resiliency Co, and also Banner Landscape. I'm going to go through and just kind of show you a couple slides first to start us off while people are joining. So, as you know, we're Team Palisades. We have the pleasure of hosting these webinars. We are also going to be hosting a resilient building fair in conjunction with West Edge Design Fair. This is similar to the Pacific Design Center event that we have hosted a month back. We're going to have a lot of exciting products that we would love to introduce to you guys for building back resiliently. So to kick us off, this is an IBHS comparison chart that we have prepared. This is comparing the different code requirements, LA County, City of LA, and then going up to IBHS base and IBHS plus that Steve will be talking about later. And you can see that, there's a lot of similarity across the board. And we will be distributing all this information later on the Team Palisades website. And then just to kind of kick us off with, here is IBHS standard architectural details I have prepared for the case study 2.0 project I have participated in. And then you'll see that, a non-combustible 6-inch up from adjacent grade, and then hour rated walls, and then also Class A roofing with metal downspouts and wire mesh covering. Now, I'm just going to jump right to it. So starting off, we have Victor Joseph. Victor Joseph is the president and chief operating officer of Mercury Insurance and a member of the board of directors. He oversees all of Mercury's operation, including underwriting, claims, technology, and product management. Victor Joseph joined the Mercury Insurance in 2009 and served in many key roles before his executive appointment. And then followed by Victor, we will have Steve Hawks. Steve Hawks is the Senior Director for Wildlife at IBHS. He took the role in 2023. Steve's responsibility at IBHS include a wildfire policy, partnership, and co-development. And then following Steve, we'll have Jonathan Dromgold. He's a strategy and operations consultant for Resiliency Company, where he helps execute rebuilding and stakeholder engagement for Resilient LA and the Delta Fund. He's the money, so I would highly encourage everyone to stay tuned for that. And then to end the program, we have Catherine Rybel, leads the design and client development for projects across San Francisco, Santa Barbara, and Los Angeles for Banner Design. And she will be presenting 4 landscape schemes for the alphabets. That's focused on Zone 0 and the fire resiliency. And also, she's a Pacific Palisades native. So we have one of our own helping us with this. All right, then, we're going to get started with Victor. I'm going to share screen for Victor. So Victor, take it away.
Thanks, May. So I'll go through some of Mercury's discounts. I did see some of the questions that were submitted. I know there are a lot of questions. I'll try to address some of them as I go through this, but I believe we'll have some Q&A at the end. And I think one thing I just want to call out now, if I do get questions about people's individual claims, I'll probably have to refer them to our claims team, so I won't be able to answer those kinds of questions on this call. With that said, I'll go ahead and jump in. So I think what you'll find, a major disclaimer, first of all, that Mercury is just one insurance company. There are obviously quite a few insurance companies in California. Everyone kind of makes their own decisions on what discounts they want to provide, how much coverage they can provide in different areas. Generally, larger insurance companies can sell more insurance in more populated areas. So Mercury being the 3rd largest property carrier in California, we can probably write maybe around 10% of a community on average. So even for a company like us, as I go through this, keep in mind that our standards, our policies, our approach may not mirror the rest of the industry. And for a company like us, even being the third largest, we might write only 10% of an average community. So there's some caveats here that I want you to keep in mind as you go through what I'm saying. I do not represent the industry. Now, one thing I can speak to that all insurance companies in California have to deal with or sort of figure out how they navigate are certain discounts that are mandated. There are some discounts that are mandated by the regulator, and those are some of the ones that are first mentioned here. And what most insurance companies have done with these is they are fairly small in the percentage impact on your rating. So the California Department of Insurance requires insurance companies to have individual discounts for certain different components. And it's shown here mainly at the top right in the home hardening section. So you have things like enclosed eaves, you have fire-resistant vents, you have multi-pane windows, etc. And insurance companies in California are required to give a discount for each one individually. Now, the challenge with that for many insurance companies is the way that they do tend to look at these types of discounts or wildfire risk is you look at sort of packages of things together. And you have to get a package of things, a set of changes, a set of home hardening features for us to feel comfortable that you've earned a discount. And in that situation, the discount ends up being quite a bit bigger than that, at least for Mercury. Again, every company is different with its level of discounts. So as we look through this, I think it's going to look sort of convoluted. It's going to look kind of confusing because it's going to feel overlapping. You're going to see a set of regulated discounts that are required per the regulator. Then you'll see a set of discounts we have per IBHS. And then you'll see Mercury has its own set of discounts that are a little bit different from IBHS. And that's just a decision that we made to provide something that we felt was still pretty significant, but maybe in some ways more attainable for the average homeowner. So I think what we can do may, oh, and at the end, I'll get into community level discounts. That's a whole nother layer that we put on top of everything because as I'm sure everyone here knows at this point, what the community does as a whole has a pretty significant impact on the wildfire exposure. So let's, let's look at the table. I think that might be easier to navigate, actually. Okay, although I know there's quite a bit here. So I'm not gonna read every line here, but basically the first column speaks to the discounts that are mandated per the regulatory requirements. These are not significant discounts. Each one of these is worth half of a percentage point on your rates. And when I talk about rates, it's for the wildfire portion of your overall homeowner's premium. So you're paying for homeowner's insurance. There's a portion of that that is specifically for wildfire. And for areas like the Palisades, that portion is over time, it's likely to make up the majority of your insurance premiums. So any discounts you can get to it will be really helpful in making the insurance more affordable. So 0.5% on the first column with each one. You can add up, I think, to a max of 5%. Now, the most significant discounts we have are the next two. It's the IBHS Wildfire Prepared, which is the base plan, and the Home Plus, which has some more restrictions or requirements. When you get to those, you can start to get some pretty significant discounts. And you can see it in the second row in the top table there. It's a function of what you've done and also the nearest structures, which that I do believe is unique to Mercury. I don't know that many other insurance companies look at how far you are from neighboring structures. We put a lot of stock into that because unfortunately, if you have homes that are very close together, like they were in this part of the Palisades, once a conflagration starts, it gets very challenging to stop it. And from a rebuilding standpoint, that might be a difficult constraint because I'm not really sure what homeowners in the Palisades are contemplating. I was up in Paradise last week, and what people have done up there is they have sort of spread out, but they have a lot more land up there. A lot of people bought up lots that were near them after the fires because the lots weren't going for very much, and they've now just decided I'm not going to build anything there. I want 30 feet, I want 50 feet of clearance between me and my neighbors. I don't think that's going to be an option for a lot of individuals in the Palisades. So for a lot of individuals, they might be at that 10 feet, which is kind of the minimum. It's less than 10 feet is within that, by the way. It's not just you have to have at least 10 feet. We will give a discount if you're under 10 feet, but it's lower. That's something that we're looking at right now to figure out if there's ways that we as a business can make a decision to go a little bit steeper. There might be some other things that we introduce into that, such as if you have a cinder block wall or something that forms a little bit of a barrier against direct flame impingement, can that sort of artificially create a bit of separation between you and your neighbors? Because I know, especially on the alphabets, the distance between homes is pretty limited. As you get more and more distance, you can get steeper discounts. But again, we're looking for other options. We want to give people a way to get a really hefty discount where we can on their wildfire premiums. And when I say hefty, I mean 20, 25, 30%, maybe more than that. And I know that right now, with what insurance companies have filed, if we're able to give a 25 or 30% discount, that's probably on the high end. I don't know that anyone's quite at that level right now with mitigation. I think most carriers are in the single digits and maybe low teens. Now, the Mercury discounts, which are unique to Mercury, are a little bit more relaxed. And if we go to the prior slide, you can look at how they compare to the IBHS ones. They're pretty similar. The difference, one of the differences that I'll call out that's not called out explicitly here, but I do think it's a probably a bigger difference to the average homeowner, and I think it's probably something that I will say IBHS probably wouldn't really support, but we've made a business decision to sort of give people, I think, a few options here. We do, as a company, we will give discounts to people that have sparse, well-spaced, well-maintained, small vegetation within the 0 to 5 feet. There are a lot of conditions that apply to this. And again, this is something I think that is probably unique to Mercury. I doubt that many other insurance companies will go down this road. But we've made a business decision to say, look, if you've got sparse plantings, your house, by many other measures, is very well mitigated. It's got a lot of home hardening done to it. We can accept some things in that area. If you've got a well-cut, well-maintained, well-irrigated lawn, we're going to check with you often to make sure it stays that way. But we're willing to provide you a discount if you still adhere to some basic guidelines in that 0 to 5. I don't think that's going to be common. I don't think that's going to be something that the industry at large is going to pursue. That is something for which we will provide a continued incentive, a discount, because we think that that is still quite a bit of improvement over where we've been historically. But that's just one thing I'll throw out there right now that is a little bit maybe unique to Mercury, is we're a bit more comfortable with that, I think, than the average carrier. The last thing I'll mention here on the discounts relates to the community discounts. So we do have a few of those that are filed. There's one that is a regulatory requirement that's on the next one. May, if we go back to that, yeah, down there. See, there's a very small discount for it, a 0.1% discount. These are communities that were identified by the regulator as warranting a discount. I think Los Angeles is one of them, as in all of Los Angeles. We don't really look at things that generally. When we look at where to provide discounts, we look on a much, much more granular level. I think the Mercury wildfire mitigation community is one that we're hoping to apply in fairly localized areas. And I think there are parts of Paradise that meet that standard. There's one community in Escondido where there are 60 homes that have all been built to an IBHS standard. We've gone to that community and said, we'll insure every single home here, and we'll provide that additional discount on top of the other discounts we're already providing. So you probably end up getting half off your wildfire premiums. Now, for this one, I think our vision with this is we want to keep it really localized. So an example of that could be if you've got a block of 20 or 30 homes that collectively have done all the right things, it may form a little bit of a bubble or an island that's relatively well protected. I think that's something that over time we'll look at ways to give the homeowners in that cohort an incentive. It's a bit of a hard thing for us to manage administratively, because how do we look at every single home on a regular basis if you've got like a dozen homes nearby that you need to look at? Are we going to ask you to go take photos of your neighbors' homes? That would be uncharted territory for us logistically to do something like that. But I do think the thing with wildfire that we're grappling with as an industry is we sell insurance to individuals, but we're dealing with a community problem. And I'm not going to get into it on this call. It's a call maybe for another day in the future, but we're looking at a completely different solution to that problem. But I still think what we're doing here is going to continue to be important to most homeowners. But I hope to find a better solution to that long term with our teams here. So that's a little bit of Mercury's current discounts. One other discount I'll mention, because people here unfortunately are in an unusual position to rebuild differently. If you build your home to a certain standard with the home itself, and I'm saying we're basically talking about concrete homes, ICF homes, or homes with concrete panels. Those are homes that we give a basic 50% off just out of the gate. I don't even care about a whole lot else with those homes. There are not that many of them. It's not that popular as a construction method, but we have partnered with some companies that do ICF construction or concrete panel construction, and we give half off not just on wildfire, but on just normal fire, right? There are homes that burn down because of an electrical fire or fire in the kitchen. If the home is built out of concrete or something that is type 1, type 2 construction, we will give half off for that. So that's also something I think Mercury does, but we don't feel that matters to the average person because you also can't really retrofit a home to that, right? You can do a lot of these other things you've mentioned here to existing homes. But unless you're starting from a blank slate, which unfortunately there are a lot of people now in Los Angeles who are, that is another option. But I've talked to a few homeowners in the Palisades who've reached out to me, some of our customers about it. I think for a lot of them, the aesthetic is not really for them, and that's fine. There are other ways to get the discount, taking a page out of what IBHS is doing, and the Mercury specific discounts are very close to IBHS. So I know I only had 15 minutes, May, so I'm trying to stay on time. So I think that's everything I'll go over now, unless there's something else you'd like me to speak to about other things about insurance or rates or why insurance companies do what they do. I can save that for the end if you want, but I'm happy to
Yeah,
do, yeah.
yeah, that would be great. So let's get Steve on. Steve, do you want to share screen? And this is from the IBHS perspective.
Yes, let me share here really quickly. Can you see it okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, May, and good evening, everybody. Steve Hawk, Senior Director for Wildfire at IBHS. And if you're not familiar with IBHS, we are a nonprofit organization that conducts applied research on how homes are vulnerable from four perils, with wildfire being one of those four. And you can see our research center and the photograph in the back of the slide here that with the test chamber in the center, and that's where we can conduct all of our research on full size structures, where we can construct an entire structure and place it inside that big concrete structure, subject it to the wind and embers from a wildfire, just as a structure would experience a real life wildfire event. And then we, on the backside, conduct structure to structure fire spread research, where we're looking at large sheds, accessory dwelling units, and maybe potentially in the future of burning single family homes, and seeing the relationship of distance between structures as well as the orientation of them, the difference of what openings can do, like windows and doors with fire spread, as well as the materials that the structures are made out of. But in the wildfire space, we're really laser focused on significantly reducing the path of the fire to become a conflagration. And it is less than 1% of the wildfires that burn under these significant conditions that result in over 95% of all structure loss and damage from a wildfire. And conflagration is really the uncontrolled spread of the fire within the community, leading to significant structure loss. And so those three conditions are really drought that occurs at any scale. It doesn't have to be a severe drought, just enough to dry out the vegetation where our wildfires typically start in our wildland areas, and to the point where it's very easy for the fire to spread within those dried out or stressed fuels. And then when you add a really significant wind component or very strong wind, which is the most critical factor leading to extreme fire behavior, that can quickly push that fire through those drought-stricken fuels into a community where it really transitions the fire from a wildland fire to an urban fire. And at that point, we really looked at the three mechanisms of exposure that the wildfire has on structures, and that's embers, direct flame contact, and radiant heat. And of the three, the embers, we feel through our research and then post-fire analysis that they are the leading cause of structure ignition, whether it's directly leading to the ignition because of an ember landing on the structure or maybe passing through a vent or other void space inside the structure and igniting a combustible item, or indirectly by embers landing around the house, igniting combustible items, and then that resulting fire through direct flames and radiant heat leads to the ignition of the structure. And then the last two, the flames and radiant heat, is either embers igniting it or the fire burning onto the property, igniting something that is combustible that can burn for long enough with enough heat to directly ignite the house, or through the flame contact, or through the radiant heat exposure. And so what do we do about how do we protect homes from the embers, the flames, and the radiant heat? And we really get back to the basics of what a fire needs in the first place in order to ignite and stay burning. And that's what's called the fire triangle. A fire needs oxygen, heat, and fuel. And if you eliminate one of those three, the fire will be extinguished. But of the three, we don't have hardly any control over the oxygen and heat, particularly underneath these urban conflagration style fires. The only one of those three factors that we can really influence, whether it's beforehand in preparing for a wildfire or for the fire suppression crews to suppress or defend structures during the event, is that fuel component. And in an urban context, fuel is anything that's combustible, whether it's a structure, accessory dwelling units, ornamental vegetation, fences, wood mulch, vehicles. Again, it's anything that's combustible that can ignite under those extreme conditions and allow for the spread of the fire. And so when we look at wildfire mitigation at each individual property, which is where wildfire mitigation starts, but and also once it starts at the individual property level, it needs to scale up across entire communities to give the community at large the best chance of survival during these intense wildfires. But at the property level, it's about looking at two specific areas. One is the area that surrounds the house, and trying to either eliminate fuel from the parcel. Can we remove it off of the property entirely? And if it's not there, it can't ignite, it can't lead to the ignition of the home. And the other is reducing its combustibility. So if you look at the bottom left corner of the slide, it's changing that wood fence to a metal material the closer you get to the house, particularly within that first 5 feet. So the fire that's burning on the wood fence will simply extinguish when it meets that metal material. And then the last option for reducing the exposure of those combustible items around the house is relocating items on the property if there's enough space to do that, so that when they do ignite, that they can safely burn and not lead to the ignition of the home. And while we're looking at trying to reduce the exposure of the combustible items that surround the house, we're looking at the structure itself and how do we increase the resilience of the building to withstand the remaining exposure of things burning around the house, which won't lead to the ignition of the home. And so we look at all the components from the roof to the siding and windows, all the way to the ground, and where do we have vulnerabilities and how can we change that vulnerability to reduce its potential for the remaining exposure to ignite that item. When we look at wildfire mitigation, we're really, again, focused on narrowing that path to that urban conflagration, or that 1% of the fire that fires that lead to over 95% of the structure loss. And so we think of wildfire mitigation as a system of components. And even if you have mitigated most of the risk. If you have at least one or more vulnerable areas still, it could be easily exploited by these high intensity fires, leading to the ignition of that item and the loss of the house. So it's that systems-based approach to wildfire mitigation. And that's what we've built into the Wildfire Prepared Home program. And if you look at the items at the base of this slide, these are the items that comprise the Wildfire Prepared Home, or maybe what you might hear referred to as the base level designation. And they're really designed for a home that is existing, that needs to retrofit to be more resilient, to withstand the exposure from embers from the wildfire. And so we look at all the components and that are most vulnerable to ember exposure, and those are the items that are listed in the bottom of the screen, like the roof and vents and gutters, and the bottom 6 inches of the house where debris like pine needles and leaves and other things can blow in during a wind event, even when it's associated with the fire, and accumulate, and then embers find that material and ignite that, leading to the ignition of the siding. So that bottom 6 inches. And then looking out at the area that surrounds the house with particular focus on that first 5 feet of having nothing combustible in that area. And then the second level of designation is the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus level, which adds on to the base level requirements, all the items listed in the blue box on the screen. And those are the items that are most vulnerable to the flames and the radiant heat from an urban fire. And it provides the maximum level of protection against those 3 vectors of fire transportation and ignition of homes that I mentioned earlier: the embers, the direct flame contact, and the radiant heat. And so how does the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus level designation stack up to the California Building Code Chapter 7A requirement? And May had shown a slide earlier that looked at the LA County and LA City requirements as well. This is really focusing down on just the plus level designation compared to Chapter 7A. And incidentally, just for information, California Building Code Chapter 7A, as of January 1, 2026, will be called Part 7 of the California Building Code. So it's going through a slight change. But if you compare the current Chapter 7A with the plus level designation of Wildfire Prepared Home, you can see that there's many similarities with just a few changes that are slightly above what the code requires in Chapter 7A. And you can see those outlined there. And then the bottom one, where the orange cell is with the X in it, where it talks about fences. Chapter 7A only addresses the building and the components, not the area that surrounds the building, where the fences and retaining walls and other things apply for defensible space. And so you can see that Chapter 7A is slightly above code, but not significantly above what Chapter 7A requires, or plus is above code. And we've also created what we've called a project plan notes. And this is created by my colleague at IBHS, Laura Blau, who's retired fire marshal from Orange County Fire Authority. And this lists all the items in it that need to be in a plan set in order to meet the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus level designation. So if you're working with an architect, definitely point out the Wildfire Prepared Home Technical Standard with a specific focus on the plus level requirements. And you can also hand them this project plan notes to insert in the plan set that will help ensure that the home is built to the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus level designation. And as I mentioned earlier, we're really laser focused on reducing the ignitions, and we're really dealing with a structure ignition problem that is leading to many other associated problems like insurance. And if we can reduce the number of structures that ignite, even during these high intensity fires, then we reduce the likelihood of conflagration, and we can help solve the insurance issue that we're experiencing across California. And May, with that, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. And then we will also have the wildfire notations on our website to distribute. Okay, so Jonathan, okay, you're the money. Let's go.
Happy to go next. Let me make sure screen is sharing over here. Charging off. Public and commercial
Jonathan, you're breaking
infrastructure.
up.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying there, and let me know if I continue to break up again, and I can just go off video, might be easier. The Resiliency Company is focused on ensuring that public, private, and commercial infrastructure projects are built to a resilient standard across the board. Our focus right now really is on Los Angeles, given the aftermath of the fires. Don't really need to go through this all over again, but we are focused on ensuring that as many of the 12,000 homes that were burned down are rebuilt to a resilient standard. So I appreciate going after Steve and IBHS because I don't have to spend that much time as to why we have selected that as our North Star driving us forward and why we see that as a $200 million investment to really save $40 billion in future losses in Los Angeles. So as we just talked about, we need to think differently about wildfire risk and how we build back something that will be resilient and outlive and bring insurance back to the table. But of course, having these conversations means there's the potential extra cost associated with us. And the last thing that we want to do as homeowners and survivors are going through this process is burden them with additional dollars required on top of everything else to rebuild to a resilient standard. So we are introducing a new model for financing insurable and resilient standard here in Los Angeles, but really something that can be scalable nationwide through our Resilient Los Angeles and LA Delta Fund work. So we understand that there was a lot of questions going on right now that it is overwhelming to think about rebuilding. And so we are structuring to bring awareness about what a home needs to look like to mitigate fire risk, clarity about what are those most important measures, guidance on selecting building materials and working with verified contractors, and as May brought out, the funding and financing portion of this, like how do you actually achieve a resilient home once you have a contractor that knows the standards and you've chosen to rebuild. So I keep mentioning the Resiliency Company and the Resiliency Delta. So just to dive that into that a little deeper with the graphic here. So we don't necessarily cover the cost to rebuild your home. We are looking at what a code compliant home needs to have in order to be funded to a resilient standard. So it is that delta, that gap between your code compliance and the next resilient standard. So IBHS Wildfire Prepared Plus is the one that we are hoping everybody can achieve. Again, understanding there's this financial gap and want to present this information another way. So you have your original home value with mortgage debt and home equity. As part of the rebuild, you are adding cost to that. But that kind of frame on the outside of the resilient rebuild, that resilient delta is what we are here to cover for homeowners across both of the fire burned areas. So we are focused on grants and loans to rebuild 12,000 homes that bring insurance back, that are meeting fire resilience standards. I'll talk a little bit more about that now, about how you actually apply for a grant, how you qualify for a loan. We are hoping to have low interest loans across the board. And this is a program and a platform that we're developing right now. And it's very close to launch. So called the Pillar Platform, stands for Promoting Innovation for Long-Lasting Access and Readiness. This is really focused on tackling two sides of the challenge, which is the financial decision-making process. Again, there's a lot being thrown at folks right now, financial outlook and sources, insurance at the table, FEMA funds, relief and recovery funds, mortgage brokers. So once a homeowner chooses to rebuild, we want to make sure, again, that there is funding and resources available to them to rebuild that resilient standard, which is Wildfire Prepared Plus standard we're pushing for homeowners to build towards. Similar way, another question that comes up is saying, if I am rebuilding, how can I trust the design, the contractors, the architect? And as part of this platform, when someone goes through this process, is essentially making sure that you are being paired up with resilient standard contractors through partnership with IBHS, partnerships with community stakeholders on the ground to make sure that you feel as comfortable throughout this process, that you know that the people you're working with are know about the IBHS standard and are going to rebuild to that. We've also had a lot of great conversations with IBHS about making sure that the plans have a stamp or a seal to say, hey, this homeowner is choosing to build to the standard. Please make sure we follow through that process. So they're offered to everyone. So again, once a homeowner chooses to rebuild, we are there to provide connections, resources, recommendations, assistance with permitting is something we also want to make sure we're able to assist with, and then ultimately getting those homes built up. So as many homes as possible, I'll repeat this over and over again, that are meeting that IBHS wildfire prepared standard. So it's really focused on folks that are starting from scratch, or if you already have a plan and are upgrading those existing plans to make sure they meet a resilient standard, we are there to fund that across the board. Grants for folks that meet certain income requirements. We're hoping that there's some type of grant actually available to everyone, whether you just need money for the windows, if it's not the entirety of the home, or whether it's the doors or some other component. But if you need a grant for the entirety of it and you qualify, we want to make sure that those funds are available to you. So this pillar platform that we're going to be launching shortly, we're hoping it'll be up and running in some way by the end of this month, actually, and fully operational by the end of the year, will kind of look like this. These are some screenshots of our model right now, but when you engage with it for the first time, there will be a much nicer home, kind of model home that you'll be able to engage with and see what a wildfire prepared plus home looks like. And you'll be able to hover, and it'll give you different recommendations and kind of guidance and education really about what that standard looks like. And then it'll present to you some options for your home, in addition to what exactly it takes to get up to that standard, how much that may cost, but always with this idea of saying, don't fear about the funding and financing part of it. We are there to help you rebuild to a resilient standard. And so right now we're already working on the ground to implement a lot of this. One of our partners is the Green Line Housing Foundation over in the Eaton Fire area to ensure that folks who are selecting to rebuild right now, whether that's an ADU or the full structure of their home, are able to have the resources and funding necessary to make sure they achieve that. Similarly with Habitat for Humanity, we're working with them to rebuild a lot of those homes. So we're looking at 50 homes already that we are prepared to finance and be a part of that rebuilding process to a resilient standard. So what does this really mean across the board? Again, for homeowners specifically, we're hoping that this also brings increased home value to your home, right? That at the end of this, during the certification process with IBHS, that actually brings up the value overall of your home. That this brings insurance back to the table, and that we are engaging in conversations about how we insure these different types of home. We've heard already about the community perspective of it and ensuring that the community to have a resilient standard, and that is incorporated into all aspects of our community, ensuring that lenders bring insurance back to the table and stabilize mortgage markets, and obviously that insurance overall are having decreased future losses, but are re-engaging with this process. So we're really tackling this from multiple angles in addition to providing the funding, but we're really trying to make sure that we convene all of the stakeholders to one place to say, hey, don't forget about the energy that is required to maintain this and to make sure that people are not forgotten during this process. Our CEO, Abby Ross, as part of this, realized that a lot of attention comes into a natural disaster in the immediate aftermath, but lasts about 6 weeks. And then at about the 6-month mark, funding, resources, and attention overall has moved on to another natural disaster. So the purpose of the Resiliency Company is to continue to be a steady drumbeat to ensure that folks on the ground are receiving the funds that are needed, the attention and the resources to make sure that we are building back a resilient community. So as I mentioned, the Delta Fund is going to be up and operational very soon, in addition to the Pillar program. So there's a QR code there, and I'll make sure that May has the link.
All right, Jonathan, you're breaking up again.
And let us know.
So
scan the QR code and you'll learn more. Yeah.
We'll definitely share everything that we receive on Team Palisades website. And then next we have Catherine.
Hi, hello there, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm Catherine Rybel. I'm from Benner Rybel Landscape Architects, and I am actually born and raised in the Palisades. So this is deeply personal to me. The Palisades is so park-like and bucolic, and I think we're trying to do everything we can to still have that feeling, that special feeling that the Palisades had, but also rebuild in a way that's safe, resilient, and beautiful. I think it gives us the opportunity to really recalculate what we're doing here and bring back a lot of beauty. So one of the first things we look at when we're looking at fire requirements as required, we've had for many years had to go through fuel modification through the city of Los Angeles and the fire department. So this is something, in high fire zones that when building a new residence, we've, been going through that process for many years. And I think there are added layers on top of that. But when we design new landscapes, not only do we incorporate plants and materials with low fuel load and strategically placed hardscape, but another huge consideration is a concept called fire laddering and the actual spatial layout of plants, which is when flames move from ground covers to shrubs to tree canopies. And we try to avoid this by designing intentionally with spacing and plant heights so that each layer is visually connected, but not physically connected. And that way the fire doesn't have a continuous path to lead upward right up to the house. So we're looking at much more, sparse strategically islands of planting that really are not right up against the home, as people have mentioned in that the zone offsets. And I know, this is definitely a hot topic, the immediate 5-foot offset zone 0. And for new builds, we are required to uphold a 5-foot buffer around every structure in zone 0. Nothing combustible can be planted here, but that doesn't mean it has to feel barren. Instead, we can integrate stone paving, gravel, seat walls, or irrigated planters. I know Mercury mentioned that maybe we might be able to do grass with them, we can definitely connect on that, but in pots. So what we really try to do is think of this as an opportunity to extend usable outdoor space while keeping the homes protected. So we'll often cluster, utilitarian pathways, seating areas right up against the house. And in that way, we're sort of have these dual zones that don't feel as barren as you might see in some photos or examples of fire resilience. And then another thing we're really thinking about is just neighborhood-wide resilience. This is something we've been approached by people who are potentially getting together with their block and they want to, build at the same time and using the same architect and landscape architect. And it seems like a really smart way to approach the landscape in a way that all the homes in a nearby community are protecting themselves as much as possible. So I think, like everybody has mentioned, one vulnerable property can really put the whole street at risk. So we're thinking a lot about that as we're designing. And then so what we've done in our work is we've worked with the Design Leadership Network, which is a big group of designers across the country and in California. So architects, landscape architects, interior designers, and we've kind of come up with a way to define the architectural vernacular of the Palisades and how it can translate into a new California classic, we're calling it, for the Palisades. So we've developed 7 different types that you can see here, and it reimagines what these typical neighborhood designs that you would have seen in the past with code requirements and how we can translate that into more a livable but up to code design. So one of the most common misconceptions is that fire resilient gardens all have to look alike. And we really don't think that. So we looked at California Spanish Colonial Revival, California Ranch, California Modern, Cape Cod, Craftsman, and Storybook, and also California Revival, Colonial Revival, and interpreted these the new classics with planting materials and detailing appropriate to each home. So I'm going to walk through just a couple of these since we don't have too much time, but this is an example of the Spanish Colonial Revival garden, and we definitely do have the offset of the 5 feet, no combustible materials, really for pathways around the house in a typical Alphabet Street lot. And then again, clustering these seating areas right up against the house. So it, doesn't even hopefully feel too much like you're missing out on plant material there. It's just being used for a different purpose. And, we can use drought tolerant and fire resilient Mediterranean species such as olives, citrus in pots, rosemary, lavender, agaves. There are some really beautiful, when spaced appropriately, plant material that we can introduce into the mix with color and sort of very experiential elements. For hardscape, we try to get creative by breaking up hardscape with ground cover material just to green it up a bit and add some texture so it doesn't feel so hard. We can play with the scale of the paving, and that really adds a bit of interest while still keeping homes safe. Courtyards and stone and stucco walls, I think, as we talked a little bit about earlier, we're trying to think of them as fire breaks in these small spaces, and can really frame intimate garden plate spaces. And then for California Modern, they're really all about clean lines, and Zone 0, again, really blends seamlessly with usable concrete patios and gravel, and can be softened by sculptural low and low maintenance plants. The fire conscious elements actually, really seem to enhance this minimalist aesthetic. We really thought, you can incorporate sculptural, architectural plants like aloe and agave, and keeping trees maintained sort of an interesting sculptural way actually adds to the aesthetic while keeping things safe. And then clean concrete, large stone slabs, really pulling in natural elements for these. Again, help with that Zone 0. And, thinking about integrating reflecting pools, linear swimming pools, also just anything where we can introduce water as an element to help in that fire break as well. And then I think reinterpreting, architectural materials have come so far, and that we can make metal look like wood now to add a bit of softness. There's no sort of boundary in what we can make things look like now with hardscape. Then Storybook Cottage, another sort of commonly one seen in the Palisades. And we really added, layered planting, a bit more whimsical, and using perennials that are less combustible, defining pathways with stone edging to add a little bit of interest with stepping stones. And then the pools, again, can help with that, the fire break idea. And then again, hardscape, really irregular stone paving, cobblestone paths, brick borders, just can add a bit of whimsy to the area immediately surrounding the house without making it feel so barren. And again, these are wood, which we would not have close or in the 5-foot zone. But again, we can do things out of metal now that look like wood. It's pretty remarkable. And then I think for the last one, the Colonial Revival Garden, this one it's much more formal and about formality and symmetry. Brick, gravel, and clipped hedges can also really, when spaced appropriately and things are irrigated and far enough away from the house, can help quite a bit with keeping fire at bay. Symmetrical formal plantings often seen in these, but again, you can have things flowering in gravel and spaced appropriately, and still have a lot of those beautiful plants that the Palisades was known for. You know, brick and stone pathways, again, with this one, reclaimed materials add so much interest, and, you know, it doesn't have to be sterile. So that was, you know, just a quick rundown. Again, I think we had 3 other designs, maybe even 4, that we were looking into. And, you know, I think what we really take away from all this is that the landscape designs can and should reflect architectural style, and that they don't all need to look the same. And the design really is key, that hardscape and layered planting can really help with strategies to make the home safer without compromising beauty. So, you know, and again, it's also, we always tell clients, resilience is really an ongoing commitment, and maintenance is such a big, important part of this. So yeah, we look forward to answering your questions, any follow-up questions, and working with all the other teams on this panel. I think, you know, we've started to work with clients too, that they're bringing their insurance policies to us, and we're working together, you know, beyond just code, but really working together to understand how we can make everything work for everybody. So, yeah.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yes.
Thank you. And just full disclosure, I was actually part of the team for the DLN on California Classic, and this will be published in the book, the new California Classic, hopefully soon. And if you guys want to see preview, I have the California Home magazine here, or you can't see. But anyway, this month's California Home Design actually has a sneak preview of all these plans. So if you guys want to pick one up, if you're still into the paper copies at your local grocery store, you can have a sneak preview of all the plans that's going to be revealed in the new California Classic. And also another disclosure, I do have Mercury Insurance, so just so everyone knows. So, but Victor and I met later on. So anyway, okay, let's get to the question and answers, and then we'll start off asking the questions that are posted online. So Allison, do you want to ask the first one?
Sure. This one is from Jane. Some window companies recommend 1 laminate pane and 1 tempered laminate because it's better for impacts from flying debris. What does Mercury stand on the best window configuration? Where does Mercury, where?
So I'd say this is probably a good question for Steve as well. I'll just say that for us, from a business standpoint, we like tempered. I mean, I think if the laminate is the glass or the ply that you're using has the same heat resistance as tempered glass, it's probably okay, but there can be laminate, I think, that has lower heat resistance. So that could be less ideal, but our current guidelines really focus on tempered glass. And we like 2, but for some of our discounts, we're okay with 1, but we still want 2 panes ideally. And I think I should just maybe clarify something I said earlier, just as if I kind of summarize Mercury's overall position, because I see a lot of questions about different components of the home. If I was to give a very brief statement on Mercury standards, again, this is not going to be the same necessarily as IBHS or other insurance companies. We will be happy to look at homes up to a point, up until we write too many. We will be happy to look at homes that are 7A plus nothing, no wood fencing or nothing in that last 0 to 5 foot range that is likely to be highly flammable and highly problematic, like a wood fence. And you've got to have defensible space that's really chopped up, really broken up, and it's got to have things like succulents or low ground cover that's well irrigated. It's got to be spread out. It's got to be broken up. It can't be near windows. It can't be near vents or points of entry into the home. So we've tried to find ways, I think, to provide homeowners, I think, with more options, but we've done that kind of as a business decision on our own. But if I was to give people simple guidance, it would be 7A. Don't have a wood fence, at least not in that last 0 to 5 feet. And you need to do a lot to break up that defensible space to make sure it's very limited in terms of its combustibility. Frankly, it's probably better to have nothing. That's why there's a lot of energy behind that. But I think we're trying to be somewhat pragmatic with our customers and give them a few options. But time will tell what the rest of the industry does or what the state permits. Hopefully that answered the first question on Windows.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, I was just going to say
Sorry,
there's another
Allison.
window question if we want to just ask it now.
Yeah, so would dual pane aluminum clad else, oh wait, no, that's home. Which one are you talking about, Allison? You want to ask that one?
Oh, yeah, that is the one with dual plane.
Oh,
Yeah,
aluminum clad wood, sorry, aluminum outside, wood inside. Would that be considered as non-combustible windows? I think it does, right, Steve?
So
Aluminum clad?
yeah, so currently the only requirement around windows is the glass itself, which type of glass it is, whether it's annealed or tempered. And for Wildfire Prepared Home Plus, is both panes being tempered. And the research that's being done around windows right now really is the lead agency on this or entity is the Underwriters Laboratory Fire Safety Research Institute, and they're doing a lot of research on windows in different configurations as well as the materials of the frame, and they're finding that vinyl framing and wood framing on the outside is very vulnerable to these wildfires. So fiberglass framing, metal framing, aluminum framing is a better option, but it's currently not required as part of Chapter 7A or the IBHS standard.
Right. But the thing is that preferably is aluminum or some sort of non-combustible frame.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. And then that goes with also attached structures, open trellises, porticos, etc. Right? It would preferably those would be non-combustible.
Correct.
Steve?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to clarify that so everyone knows. Okay. Because we get a lot of questions like that. Okay, so the second question is how will you look at alphabet homes where there is a wide variation of mitigation, since community mitigation is most likely not realistic? Well, homes that meet wildfire prepare standards get a meaningful discount to homes that are combustible construction without wildfire prepare status.
So I mentioned earlier that the way we look at well, I didn't really get into detail on this. So we'll write more homes in communities that have more mitigation. We'll provide steeper discounts in communities that have more broad and widespread mitigation. We'll never write an entire community unless it's something where the value of the homes all in is right now I'd say we'd probably cap that around 100 million or so. Which might, depending on where you live, that community in Escondido, where we're willing to offer insurance to all them, that's probably about 100 million. So we can push further if more homes have it, but we'll still write homes individually. That's really important to us, of course. That's the main thing that we look at. But if as we look at the broader area, we get a better feel for the awareness, the engagement, the collaboration, it allows us to write more. And we see that in places like Paradise, where the awareness is really broad, the community holds each other accountable, they're all really engaged. We're willing to write a lot more homes in those areas and provide steeper discounts.
Oh, we're committed here in the Palisades. I think Team Palisades is definitely committed to make sure everybody build back resiliently. Okay, Allison, do you want to ask the next one? The co-formed steel panel?
sure. And I believe these are relevant to the fencing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Jane asked about cold form steel, not concrete. And her second question is cold form steel with no combustible materials.
I think she asked this when I was talking about concrete construction. And to me, if it's type 1 or type 2, that qualifies the home for a very steep discount. Now, we do still care about some of the other things outside the home. So the concrete homes I've seen, they don't have any vents, so that takes care of a big problem or a big vulnerability. But we do still look for certain things outside the home as it relates to vegetation and defensible space. I mean, we remember seeing a home in Paradise that looked like a concrete bunker, but they had left a window open and the house was lost. So you have to think about the different points of vulnerability that exist on the home, and building a house out of concrete or steel does a lot, but it doesn't make a home invulnerable. You have to think about multiple layers of redundancy and protection that you'd want to have. So I think that's what Jane was asking about with that one. I can read the other ones if you want, just to save you some. Oh, can
Yeah,
people
that'd
see
be
the
great.
questions that have
Yeah.
been asked, or should I read them out loud?
Yeah, people can see most of the
Okay,
questions. I
people
think
can
most
see
of these are
them.
most of them.
Well, there's a question about whether, from Mercury's standpoint, do you need concrete inside and outside, or is outside sufficient? When I talk about type 1, type 2. I think it's interior as well. But in terms of the house just being insurable, we don't require type 1, type 2 construction. I mentioned earlier something like 7A with a few additional features. You don't have to have concrete inside the house too for something like that. We're really thinking about protecting the exterior. Nothing about fire sprinkler systems. Again, companies will differ on this. We don't put a lot of stock into active protection systems. I had a few friends in the area who were evacuated and they had different systems and they didn't work. And that's not a scientific assessment, that's just anecdotal, but I do think as a company we like to put our emphasis on more passive protections that don't require people to do a lot of things just before they're leaving. They don't require electricity or water to be functioning because those things can fail and we've seen them fail. So we don't really put much on that. That could change in the future, but for the time being, having sprinklers or foam that gets sprayed on your house is not going to affect our decision, at least at Mercury. I'm not sure what the next one is. I don't know if it's a question, but it just says no. Oh, this was when Steve was talking now. This was at 5:28, so I'm gonna pass it along now.
Okay, yeah,
I
and just
think,
to ask or
mhm.
add on to what Victor mentioned about sprinklers, we our research and that of other renowned research organizations, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the other one I mentioned, UL, Fire Safety Research Institute. Nobody's currently recommending external fire sprinklers because of all the reasons that Victor just mentioned. There's a lot of other systems that are needed in order for them to work in the extreme conditions that they need to work under, and particularly the influence of wind on the water spray, and is it going to hit the target area that needs it the most, and so forth. So the passive systems are always in place, always working. They don't require anything else in order to help protect the home. But this one about openings, we're looking at how openings, whether it's doors or windows, in the orientation of one structure to the single family home affects potentially the spread of the fire. And particularly when you use non-combustible materials on the outside of the structure where the fire is more contained to the inside of the structure as opposed to inside and spreading on the outside because of combustible materials. And in that instance where you can increase the spacing, use good building materials, even at tight spacing, with a non-combustible exterior, we've seen a lot of instances during our post-fire analysis where stucco houses stay intact fairly well and the walls stay in place and force most of the heat from the fire burning inside the structure straight up instead of spreading out to where it could influence the neighboring houses.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think this one's for Catherine. So rosemary plants burns very easily, not a good plan. Oh, okay, that's not even a question. That's
I
actually
think that was,
just,
I would think it was a picture of coast rosemary. I figured it out, which is
right.
different, but yes, good catch.
And then actually, this is a good question for the alphabets. Many lots in the alphabets only have 4-foot setback on the side. How does the group think about 5-foot buffer zones? And when many homeowners will only be able to control 4 feet if they build up to the minimum required setback.
Right, I can take the first stab at that unless somebody else wants to jump in after me. But yes, in those tight spaces, you can do as much as you can out to the property line or 5 feet to create a non-combustible zone. And even in those tight spaces, the fire doesn't burn with the same intensity throughout the entire fire area. There's varying intensities. The wind is very shifty and changes directions a lot. And so any added space you can provide is a benefit, and where you don't have great spacing, as Victor mentioned earlier, providing like a non-combustible fence in between them can add protection and help shield the structure from one burning next door, at least up to the height of the fence.
Dinner's ready if you want to eat.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, does Mercury have coverage limit like fair plan? That question, Victor, can you respond to that one? Or, and
Where
also
is
will
this
you?
one? Where is this one,
is
May?
This was one's for
Oh,
either.
coverage limit like fair plan.
Yeah,
Well, I would say fair plan generally has more limited coverage compared to normal insurance products. It wasn't really designed, as I'm sure many people know and have maybe unfortunately found out, it wasn't really designed for homes in these areas. It was really designed more for homes that had a hard time getting insurance for reasons that had nothing to do with things like wildfire. So, although they have made a lot of changes to expand the offerings of the FAIR Plan, increase the coverage limits, I would still say that the limits and the coverages you get will probably generally be more comprehensive from normal admitted insurance companies, like many of the names you've heard of. I mean, the state has the goal to get people off the FAIR Plan, so that should be sort of maybe revealing of how the positioning is between different companies and entities.
right. And also Tanya has a question for Steve. How can we get the stamp for IBHS plus designated asset?
The first that would be to include the plan set or the plan project notes into the plan set to ensure that at least from the start it's being designed to the plus level designation. And then as the building is complete, then you can apply to the Wildfire Prepared Home Plus program or Wildfire Prepared Home program for a designation from IBHS. And there's a process that you would go through in order to achieve the designation.
And Tanya, we will distribute that in our future meetings. Actually, we already have it on the Slack channel. So if you but we'll definitely distribute that again. Okay, so Allison, do you want to?
Oh, sure.
what-
Martin had a question. Mercury is currently writing new policies for existing homes in the Palisades or adjacent communities as an alternative to the FAIR Plan, which we just talked about that FAIR Plan, but and how soon can they expect future rates to be published in the SIS rate filing?
So I think for us, the way we look at places like the Palisades is we would be back. We'll be writing more homes. We will view the area, assuming the communities kind of do the right things from a risk mitigation standpoint, and hopefully other stakeholders too. The community controls a certain amount of the risk, but there are also surrounding areas that influence the risk too. There are many stakeholders in this problem. Assuming the community and all those stakeholders are able to keep the risk lower coming out of this, we will certainly be writing more homes. We'll write new homes. We'd be very happy to write more in the Palisades. I mean, I think it happens for the worst reason, but when you look at places like Paradise and now Palisades, now Altadena, there is an opportunity to build communities that are very far ahead of many other communities in the rest of the state of California. So I think from my standpoint, it would be a bad business practice to leave a place that's had a fire for many reasons. But if nothing else, you would expect the risk to be more reasonable moving forward if people learn the right lessons. And I think it's pretty clear that's happened in areas generally that go through something so traumatic. There was another part of that question I do want to address on rates. And then also something on how we look at risk. There was a very high fire severity zones. So I'll start with the rates part. So Mercury recently had a rate level approved with the Department of Insurance. This is before the most recent one. There's one that's currently sitting on their desk. It will probably be there for quite some time. There was one that was approved just before that. It introduces and steepens a lot of the discounts I've talked about, where you can now get 30, even 40, maybe even 50% off your wildfire premium. With that change, however, the rates on homes that have wildfire exposure went up. That was a filing we had actually before the fires even happened in the Palisades. That the rate approval timeline in California and certain states is pretty lengthy, so that had been sitting there for some time. The new rates that are coming forward, we filed for a 6.9% rate increase with the most recent filing that we have. That 6.9% will not be distributed equally across all of our customers. It's going to hit people who have more wildfire exposure more significantly. And I'm comfortable talking about this more generally in that you're going to see a similar pattern across the industry. The FAIR Plan just filed for a 35, they wanted 80%. I think they're going to get maybe around a 35% rate increase. You're going to see insurance companies continuing to increase their rates in areas that have wildfire exposure. It's going to become worse. And I think our hope and our plan, our vision at Mercury is that we want to make sure we always have the most competitive rate for homes that have the mitigation that's been done to them, and for communities that have done the mitigation. If you have not done those things, your rates are going to increase by a very significant percentage. And we're trying to provide people with a path out of that by having these steep mitigation discounts. So you make the investments, you'll see the rewards, and you'll see insurance rates increase by less. They'll probably still go up though. And I say that because a lot of this was done before the fires. For companies like us, our reinsurance costs have gone up dramatically. We pay over $200 million a year for insurance for Mercury to help protect us in case we have major events like the one that we had. So there are a lot of things that drive costs for insurance companies. There's inflation, there's a cost of reinsurance. Inflation comes in the form of labor and materials, and we've seen that trend up over time. It goes up in general. So the last comment there about very high fire severity zones. Insurance companies, as far as I know, generally do not use those maps. I know that those maps are controversial. At this point, most companies, as far as I know, use different tools. They use different models, they use different systems. So seeing that your home is in a very high fire severity zone per the state maps or not, it may not tie as much to insurance as you would expect.
Thank you. I think this other question, can we get more clarity on concrete inside and outside? If all exterior walls are concrete, but the interior is steel frame and plaster, does that meet the concrete home discount?
So when we talk about type 1 and type 2 construction, and I'm not an expert in this, so I need to be really careful with what I say. We're talking about homes that generally have non-combustible construction. That's interior and exterior. You can still get pretty significant discounts from Mercury without having to do that. But I'll just say that just generally, I know the definition is it's usually a mixture of concrete and steel. I know type 2, you don't necessarily need as much fireproofing on the materials, but if you've got a home where you're doing the exterior concrete and you're doing some things with the interior, you still have some wood inside. If you do the right things on the outside, you do the right thing with your vents, you adhere to Chapter 7 and go beyond that and take a page out of IBHS's book, you'll still get a pretty substantial discount from a company like Mercury. So I think type 1 and type 2 is more of an extreme approach. It's less common, but you can get more of a discount with that. But we're still going to care about some things outside the home too. So I wouldn't stress out too much over feeling like you have to go down that road to get a significant discount or to be insurable. I don't think that's going to be necessary.
So just I clarify for everybody, type 1, type 2 construction is based on the construction standard for building codes. So typical wood frame is type 5 construction. And also if you do type 1, type 2, you also have, it's more of a commercial type of construction. It's also a different way of plan check. So your plan check might be more stringent too, just so everyone's aware of that too. Okay, so let's see, what other questions are there? Allison, is there more?
There is, and I think this one is for Catherine. What are the options of planting mitigation if it conflicts with plants protected by the state and urban forestry?
That's a really great question. And you know, so thus far, we sort of go through two separate processes when we put a planting plan for a new build. And so it'll go through the fire department and they check our planting plan to say, have you laid everything out correctly? Are you using low fuel mod plants? And then that sort of gets checked off. And then there's a separate process that goes through the building department showing that you are protecting protected trees. So oaks, sycamores, I think there's about 7 of them. And thus far, those two entities have not really spoken to each other and haven't necessarily needed to interact. So I think this is going to be a bit of a new situation where groups are going to have to talk to each other a bit more, and we'll probably just have individual projects that will need a little further review in those situations.
And then also just to clarify, if you're from alphabets, a lot of us probably won't have more than 500 square foot of planting. If you do more greater than 500 square foot of landscaping, then you're required to go through Mellow and then the departments that Catherine had discussed. Okay, let's see, and then conflict. So we're coming up on quarter after. If the panelists are okay for staying a little after, can we go another 10 minutes asking questions? If you guys are good with it.
I have a hard stop, so May, feel free to share the link and other information.
Okay.
And then happy to be additional resources afterwards.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so let's see, I think we discussed the IBHS designation versus type 1, type 2 construction. So next one is Marjorie's question. There's a paradigm shift in the recent fire where no firefighter support and no water. If we hire private firefighters in the growing business in California, would that qualify for reduced rates? And second, we notice that every house with 100% hardy board exterior attractive, that clapboard did not burn. Our hardy frame did not burn. It is concrete based. I think that's more statement. So I guess that's Steve and Victor.
I guess I'll take the first part with private firefighters. We don't provide any credits for private firefighters. I've talked to different companies that provide this service. One of the disclaimers we've gotten from them in the past is they can't guarantee a response in the first 24 hours, to which we've told them if you're not there in the first 24 hours, usually it doesn't really matter. Now, this fire may be one of the exceptions to that rule, and that there were homes that were burning well after the first 24-hour period. But in most fires that we see, it really moves fast enough that the first 24 hours really is what matters. And we've also generally looked at if Cal Fire and when you talk about Southern California, you tend to have quite a bit of density in fire suppression resources. You have a lot of mutual aid. If they're unable to get a handle on the fire, and I talked to a lot of firefighters who told me that this was more in Altadena, but they had to get 4 fire trucks to have a chance of slowing down a fire on one home. If you're talking about private firefighters, they generally don't have that level or those kinds of resources. So we don't really believe in it as something that significantly changes the risk profile for the average house. I think that we go back to putting a lot of stock into what I would say are passive defenses. We'll provide discounts for that. We'll provide incentives for that. We'll sell more insurance to people who have done the right things there, such that you're not relying on electricity, water, or people showing up right on time to do the things that they hopefully can to stop a fire from burning your house down. But a lot of the firefighters that we see, what do they do when they show up? If they are the private firefighters, they cut down stuff in the 0 to 5 foot zone. They put tape over the vents. So if you've done a lot of the right prep work ahead of time, they probably won't even be able to do a whole lot beyond what you've already done in terms of building a really solid foundation to begin with. You're not reliant on someone else showing up to save your home right in the nick of time. And hardy board, we like. Hardy board is fiber cement, I believe. That's fine. That's great. There's other questions I'll just take right now on, do you need a metal roof? At least from our standpoint, Class A is good. I think that's the IBHS standard as well, Steve, that we like Class A roofs. They come in many forms. I think if you've got tile roofs are great. If you've got bird stops or ways to prevent stuff from getting in under the tile at the edge of the roof, that's important because you can have stuff collect under there. But you don't have to go out and get a bunch of metal roofs. I think that's not that common outside of the mountains, and they're probably it's a bit of overkill, I would say. I think there are a lot of ways you can do simple things, and a lot of homes actually aren't that far off to begin with in California nowadays. You don't see a lot of wood roofs anymore.
Yeah, and all homes in Pacific Palisades are required to rebuild to Chapter 7A, which requires a Class A rated roof. So you have many different options there, and of those options, they have many different material choices as well. And just to tag on to what Victor said about private firefighting resources, they also have to integrate into the incident management system. And that can be difficult to do because the incident commander is responsible for everything that happens within the fire perimeter. And if you allow people to go in that cannot integrate into the incident management system and communicate with the other firefighting resources around them, that could lead to firefighter injuries and deaths. And so there's a process for that to occur. And as Victor said, the first 24 hours is critical. If you analyze CAL FIRE's damage inspection data, over 90% of the structures are destroyed within the first 12 to 24 hours.
So we also have a question here about California law requiring homeowners to disclose fire mitigation upon sales of their property. Will any of you know about that?
I do. It stems from Assembly Bill 38. And if you're selling your home, then you have to disclose. I think there's two different things that you have to disclose. One is a list of low-cost retrofits that was produced by CAL FIRE, which items you have completed on that list. And then the other one is if you have taken other steps. And I may not have that quite right, but you can look up Assembly Bill 38 and the requirements. I think it's in Civil Code, section 1102.
But I think Daphne has a question. Daphne, you want to ask that question, and then we'll conclude our webinar today. Thanks. Daphne, you're muted.
You're right. I'm sorry. I think people have been asking in terms of having to, what they need to do to get the coverage, but also to maintain coverage. If they're doing things to qualify under IBHS or plus standards and they secure the insurance and there are upgrades and recommendations, do they have to follow those in order to maintain those? And what does the insurance company do to check that they are doing it or that their neighbors are continuing to follow the rules?
So I can handle the designation process. The designation is good for 3 years. And the standard that is in place at the time of the designation is the standard that the home needs to be maintained to throughout that 3-year period. Now, we do periodically update the requirements of the standard when research advances, and we have new requirements based on that. At the time of renewal, so after the 3-year designation expires, then more than likely you would need to comply with the new standard in place at the time. We do grandfather some particular items. If we make a significant change to the standard, for example, right now we are changing eaves. So eaves have a requirement in a current standard that allows for a 1-hour assembly. That is going to be removed in the new standard that we are currently working on. But if you have a house that has been designated as that prior to the release of this new standard, then that will be a grandfathered item, the eaves, because of the significant change and burden that would put on a homeowner to come into compliance with the new standard.
Okay. Okay, there's just one last question about the glass pergola. I don't know if you can see it. Can you have a glass pergola on your roof, or does the whole house have to be tiled? So I think that's a Steve question too.
No, the main roof of the house, pergola doesn't really have to be have any roof to it really, but it can be glass.
Okay, but it just has to be also rated, correct, Steve? Like a skylight.
It's not combustible, so yeah, it's okay if it's a regular annealed glass too.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for doing this. And then we'll distribute all the information afterwards. And then I know that we probably will have another one of these later on because we have so many questions online, as you guys have seen. Thank you so much, Vickers. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Laura, even though you haven't appeared, but well, thank you too. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.